Those of you that know me already, you're going to get an introduction again. So my name's Cindy Willcocks, and I'm the founder of Arterne, Enriching the Next Generation, which is a community interest company, not for profit. I'm also a founder of Arterne Limited. But I'm here with Sven today. I'm going to let him introduce himself in a sec. We've got 30 minutes. And, we hope that you'll be as interactive as you can be. And I'm seeing that Owen there is saying that Sven should sing for a minute to check the sound. Sven, do you want to introduce yourself?
Wait, I introduce myself. Yes. I'm basically Sven. I'm an East German. I'm a really crazy guy. Some people know me, but by now I have a crazy story. I love conflict, and I run now a company where I just want to help people with all their stuff and their conflicts. So yeah, that's me.
Great. So I think it would be useful for people just to hear about how we kind of got to being in this session. So, I mean,
yeah,
the people that have been following me, they know about the creation of L.O.V.E Leadership as a model of conducting yourself as a leader, and that's both as an individual and within companies or communities. And we met through that and some of the work that you were doing. So do you want to say a little bit about the work that you were doing at the time?
Well, my journey is quite crazy. So the last company I worked for, we had I developed something. I was training the staff, and I sat down and thought, okay, how do I motivate myself? How do I do things? And I suddenly noticed that I could project them into 3 loves, the way I motivated myself as an employee, and found like, okay, it's 3 loves. It's to love the customer, to love the product and service package, and to love the company. And that these 3 loves were really keeping me on the go and motivated. And then what was really interesting was that I suddenly had a framework I could kind of build a training around. And then I started talking about this, and then, we basically got in touch because you said like, oh, I really love this. Have you heard about my L.O.V.E Leadership? And then it just really went from there, where suddenly, it was really cool to see that our values just matched, and we had a very similar idea of motivation.
Yeah, definitely. And I think like when you're talking about kind of company culture, it's really important to recognize that people can be talking about similar things, but also they might be coming across in different ways. So you were talking about 3 loves, and I was talking about L.O.V.E Leadership. The great thing about it is there were some similarities between it, some synergy, and we met in a local cafe, didn't we? And
yeah.
I think it was about like 2 hours talking about, what we were involved in. I was typically late. For those of you, give me a thumbs up if you can believe that I was actually late. But yeah, we spent a couple of hours just kind of talking to each other about our different models, but also the similarities. And I think like that's really essential when you think about workplace culture. That's really essential, because what we are getting in the workplace is a lot of people that are kind of coming together from different cultures, different backgrounds. And by culture, I'm not really just talking about where you were born or the colour of your skin, or culture can mean a whole host of things. When I talk about culture, I've got a very distinct culture from my background and growing up on a council estate, and how that was for me. That's all part and parcel of my culture. My values that my parents have instilled into me, that's part of my culture. It's all of it. It's not just about where we're born. It's much more than that, isn't it? And I think that's what you and I were talking about when we were talking about Three Loves and Love Leadership. So, but in terms of your three loves, it's kind of moved on from there, though. It's moved on from that initial conversation, hasn't it?
Yeah, for me, it just moved on. I went last year through a quite dramatic time of emotionally. And then one of my breakthrough moments was actually this book, Dare to Lead by Brené Brown.
You love
Um, I love this book so much because she speaks on one of the pages about core values, and I just thought, like, I don't even know what that is. I don't know what my core value is, and I found it so amazing. Where then suddenly there was this page of 100 values, and I looked through them. I encircled one, and it was clear. Okay, you have 10 to 15, and I just went through them, and suddenly had the question: how do I react in conflict situations or in under pressure? Which of all the values that I just encircled would I sacrifice in the process? And within 5 minutes, I suddenly had my core value identified, because I knew there's everything. I put everything on hold except the one, and that was to be curious. Um, and that really transformed a lot for me, because it put my whole journey into context. And also because I had learned on my journey to love the idea of conflict, and then suddenly see like how important it is to have conflicts. I just felt suddenly so released and so free in a very different way. And then I started looking into my stuff again and thought, like, three loves. Yeah, three loves still makes sense. It's still right. But I want to focus myself on a single one thing. I want to really focus on the whole idea of conflict, which really my life was all about. To have that idea of learning to deal with my inner conflicts, but also with my external conflicts. So when I was 15, the wall coming down, the Berlin Wall coming down, to be forced from one culture to another, that creates already a culture shock, and also a conflict in your life. But also the way I viewed the world at the time, I suddenly was in a continuous conflict of relearning who I actually am. And that was kind of becoming a real theme. And that's what also I saw then, suddenly being free from my inner emotional turmoil. I suddenly saw, like, any subject I would touch, I would always talk about why I love conflict. So, and that's why I just thought, like, let's stop being broad, and let me just focus on this one thing, and come from that point of teaching people why conflict is actually something really cool, and something that brings people forward, and it creates opportunity and unlocks potential.
Yeah. So, I'm just going to check in with the people that are watching us. I mean, is there anyone out there that can kind of relate to what Sven's saying in terms of conflict being a good thing? Because I think we're brought up in a society where we're taught that conflict isn't that great. So if you're in conflict, I think the society would say, that is a negative thing for the most.
Yeah.
We see that all the time. So I'm just wondering if anyone out there is kind of thinking, I get what Sven's saying, that conflict's good, but how is it good? So who give us a thumbs up if you're with us? Give us a thumbs up if you think that conflict is good.
It seems like
Yeah, in terms of being brought up in East Germany, you talked quite a bit about your own story, and I know that you've been doing some sessions around your own story, which have gone really well. And you're talking about the culture and how that culture was different to what you experience now. I mean, were there any similarities, or was it just different?
I think the similarities is that the ground values that we have between people are always the same. I think it doesn't matter where you will go in the world, they will always be the same. And like a ground value or the ground understanding of what love is, if we really dig down in depth what that means, I think we all will end up with a very similar understanding. So I think I can go anywhere in the world and ask if stealing from your neighbor is something good. Probably everybody will tell me anywhere in the world that's not good. Or if cheating is good or bad, everybody will tell me it's bad. And so there are, of course, those similarities because we are humans. And I that was for me very important to discover, that from the hard side of life, we are all very similar. We operate on a very similar value system that is very unconscious, I think, for many of us, but it's there. And so this whole thing of having relationships and finding them important, to support each other and finding this important, and they were definitely there. Those human values, or family, that family is something important. My parents tried to protect me, even though they had to do this in a really weird way of living a double life. But for them, it was common sense to protect your children and your family, and I think those things will be always the same. It doesn't matter where you go in the world.
Yeah, and I guess when you're talking about relationships, that does extend to the relationships that you have in the workplace.
Yeah, exactly.
Talking about relationships where we're, intimately involved with someone, we're talking about every aspect of relationships. So, you have relationships with people at work, you have relationships with people that you network with, you have relationships with other organisations. Everything is in relation to something else. I think that's really important to recognise. So I was just going to clear up for people that when I'm talking about love leadership, I am talking about love as the main principle. But I use love leadership for kind of 4 areas. So that being listen, that being own, that being voice, and that being power. So love leadership for me is about how you conduct yourself as a leader. So if you start with yourself, everything else will follow. So my belief is that love leadership is something that you work through, you go on a journey for yourself where you're kind of listening to yourself inside and out, but not listening to the negativity that might kind of hold you back. You're owning your own stuff, you're remembering your roots, and you're thinking about who you're being in any given moment. So the information that you're given there, Sven, about your history and your parents and how that was, that all informs who we are today. We choose what we do with that, and sometimes that shows up in conversations or relationships, and we may not even be aware of it. But I guess for my love leadership model, and voice for me is in the love leadership model, it's everyone's got a voice, and it's about not being afraid to use that. And I think that probably aligns itself quite well with our conversation about conflict, because there are occasions where you might be sat in a meeting and being afraid to say anything because you don't want that challenge or conflict, or you don't want the consequences. And lots of people have this voice, and also alongside that, this internal dialogue that they may not reveal for fear of getting into a conflictual situation. So and E is around empowering, so it's empower, and it's about your intention. So it's about educating yourself, educating people, and engaging. So having an opportunity to engage with that, with the hope that we're just all evolving together. So that's love leadership in a nutshell. But I just wanted to clear that for people, just so that people didn't think, they're on there just talking about 3 loves, love this. It is about that. It's about a sense of self. Both of us are quite hearty, we're quite spiritual. But I think we're talking about something different when we're talking about these 2 models that come together, and I think to recognize that. So,
and it is like, for me, I think that's where we clicked, was we both focus on the heart. We don't focus on the brain. We don't try to make people think something different than they feel, but actually helping people to align their actual feelings and take themselves as a whole being serious and be willing to communicate that. And that is kind of something that I found very strange when that culture shift happened, that, suddenly you walked into a culture where everything seemed to be very brainy, very, very cutting. And, if you're intelligent enough to just manipulate someone, you just do it. And that was, I think, a very weird thing, but also then discovering that I was manipulated by systematically indoctrinated, and then suddenly realizing that actually it limited my heart. It cut off my heart from my brain, and to realign myself to be normal, but
Yeah.
in quotes. But
Who's
it's
normal?
it's
Thumbs up if you're normal.
but this was for me something really, seeing this and seeing so many people struggling with the idea of their personal values, and they feel they are not appreciated in the business community. And that is simply not true. That is a perception, I think, in most people, to help them to see, like, you perceive that, but it's not necessarily so. Yeah.
I think
I
it's
think we
really.
might have 5 minutes or so, just
Oh,
to give you
okay.
an idea.
Oh, time's gone so quick today. So yeah, I mean, I think the message there is around recognizing that we take our whole selves to the workplace.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I like your story about kitchen gossip that you talk about. And I think I don't know if you want to share that with us today or not, but I think the conversation about kitchen gossip, the conversation about bringing our whole selves to the workplace and how that influences things, really important. And
Yeah.
I guess my message around bringing your whole self is like, really bring your whole self. It's okay. You don't have to kind of try and conform to fit in. Yeah, we have rules and we have ways that we need to conduct ourselves so that we can behave in a way that, it aligns itself with company values.
Yeah.
It's fine, but it's how you use that, I guess. You might be frustrated with a customer, but you're not gonna be swearing at them or
Yeah.
insulting them. It's about your intention. So for me, it's about the kind of listening that own the voice and empower. So if you're doing all those things in combination, then you're not going to find yourself where you're using your voice and it's going to have a negative impact on someone. It's just going to invite something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I would say that I describe myself as Marmite quite often. You either love me or hate me. And what I'm actually saying when I use that phrase is there are some people that will tolerate my open communication, and there will some people that will just be totally switched off by that. And what sits at my heart is good intentions. And I've had to learn a skill to be able to say what I really mean and not be afraid to do that. And
Yeah.
I am forever inviting people in teams to have direct conversations with each other about things. And again, this is something that you and I have spoken about. So,
Yeah.
I'll use an example of the kitchen, the kitchen thing. But if there's dirty dishes in the sink, or if someone's not emptying the bin, or I found myself in positions where teammates might moan about other teammates behind their back rather than just have a direct conversation with them. And it's fascinating because those things, they're kind of small in the context of an organisation, but they do have a big impact on that relational aspect of teams. So, if people aren't prepared to have open conversations, it makes it a bit of a challenge to, be comfortable in being yourself.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you would add to that, Sven?
I mean, there's this what I know or noticed in also my relationship, where my wife is, for instance, somebody, she's very closed up sometimes, and it took her a long time to open up. And it's, I think, something, I've now learned through her also to recognize and actually say like, okay, there are people who find it extremely hard to even be self-aware in some sense, and to help them, to give them the opportunity, to give them small steps to move forward, rather than trying to like, you have to be completely open. They might never do that, but to help them then on an individual basis to say like, see it as an opportunity. I want to create a small safe space. You have to make the one step forward. And so I'm aware, there are many people who can probably reach very quickly because they understand that, or they see this really is something new, is something nice to embrace and see how it goes. But I also like your story that you told me once in your team, where you said like, you had every team meeting started with, say what's wrong, like just tell, say what you don't like about the company, and that you suddenly found over weeks that suddenly people were not interested to have these conversations anymore because there was nothing to say.
Yeah, exactly.
But then you stopped it, and then within a few weeks, all is back to the old kind of habit. And it just shows we need to talk, we need to open up, and even if there's nothing to say, to have this sudden space where we can talk is so important for us to get together and voice what we have to say. And your meetings basically created a safe space where people knew if anything is going on, I didn't have the chance to talk to someone, this is the place where I can definitely open it up.
Yeah.
And it made people more comfortable to do that. As soon as the public space disappeared, everything becomes hidden again. And I find it very interesting to hear that story.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Kat's just commenting. Hello, Kat. She's saying, I love this. That's so true. So I don't, I'm guessing the conversation is something that resonates with her. Yeah, I mean, company culture, I'm just really fascinated in company culture, organizational culture. And I think that stems from the work that I do with families, actually. So how everything acts in relation to everything else. So in family therapy, you would be looking at the different kind of voice of people within family unit. And I think it's the same in companies. And I think
exactly.
try and create cultures where people don't feel like they're having to put their head above the parapet, is what I hear. And that they can feel that actually I can just be me, I can just say what I want to say, and it will be received in a way that's well intentioned. Because often these conversations around conflict aren't about shooting people down or being negative about a person or a situation. It's just about giving feedback. This week I've been in and out of one of the offices in Brisbane, and I've been talking to people about my nursing qualifications in the UK, and I found myself saying that I didn't want to make a complaint, I just wanted to feedback. And it was just amazing because I've got a couple of minutes.
It could be open anytime. I think it could be closed, or our Zoom call at least. I could join you on Facebook probably.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, I think it's just interesting the language that you use and the reaction it has as well. I mean, from that story, what I was going to say is that I think if I said I want to complain, I would have received one reaction. But the fact that I just want to give you some feedback about my experience, that felt like something different to them. The conversation, whether I call it complaint or feedback, is going to be the same. So it was just interesting to experience that. So we're running out of time now. I think it's flown by. Before I go, I just wanted to show people this book. This is on the live. The Power of Company Culture. Nice little read. There's a nice little chapter in there, or a section in there that talks about no, saying no. It's really good. And I think that's something that people struggle with sometimes. So they that's probably a whole nother half an hour, maybe a whole day, I don't know. But saying no when you mean no, and not saying yes when you mean no. But that could create a whole host of other conflicts, I guess. So I'm going to say goodbye to everyone today, just for this section. If you've liked what you've heard, then please comment and let us know. I think there's opportunity for us to do more of these. This is going to be a live recording on Zoom that we're going to post out, and hopefully the live Facebook Live connection has lasted so that you've got the gist of the conversation. We're still working with technology here. I didn't say I was a pro recorder, but I'm happy to share information. And I just want to thank Sven for joining us and talking about those things. So thanks, Sven, and thanks everyone for watching. Catch up soon.
And great for what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.